How's it going, everyone? Dave Brown here with the New Populace. Thank you again for joining me. I've been giving this whole situation with Wagner and this mutiny a lot of thought, and it's really shocking to me that somebody like Putin, who we in the West view as a dictator or a authoritarian leader, that he allowed Prigozhin, an underling, to create so much trouble for him and for the war effort. Now, Putin just gave some comments. They were pumped up as being a big deal, some changes coming. Yet, what I've seen so far, and of course I don't speak Russian, so I rely on other people's translations and summary of his comments. What he said wasn't really that big a deal. He mentioned a lot of the Wagnerites were unaware of Prigozhin's activity, so he's not going to punish them, and they can return to other units in the Russian regular army or go to Africa or wherever. So he said that. He reiterated that they got to defend the fatherland in this time of trial, being at war with NATO. But he didn't really say anything too important as far as shocking or some major change in the Russian high command. So it was really, not that big a deal. But back to this issue of Putin allowing Prigozhin to do what he did. There are a few possibilities. One is that, and people have mentioned this, that there was some sort of ruse between Putin and Prigozhin with an ulterior motive that we are unaware of. And I really just can't buy that, because so far the damage that this has done, the cons here, far outweigh any potential pros or any way that Putin could take advantage of it. So the idea that this was done purposely with Putin's consent, I just don't buy that. There's no way to spin this. This was not a good thing. So anyone doing that, I just question. Secondly, I will say too that there's this, not a rumor, but some people are saying the CIA was involved with Prigozhin. I don't buy that. Sometimes you just have a jerk on your team who says a lot of stupid crap. And Prigozhin is that jerk who says a lot of stupid crap. Doesn't mean he's working for the enemy. It means he's playing games, being impulsive, being narcissistic and selfish, and doing things for his own benefit rather than the benefit of the team. And this is the situation here with Prigozhin. Just a clown, being a clown, doesn't mean he's working for or with MI6 or the CIA. So I don't buy that. But, again, what it really came down to is, in my opinion, that Putin had the power to remove him anytime he wanted to. But he thought there would be blowback if he removed a guy that had gotten a lot of popularity and was something of a rising political figure in Russia. Not a huge one, but he had got himself a lot of attention, and he had a lot of supporters in Russia. And I think ultimately Putin was worried that if he just axed him when he was in Bakhmut, that would backfire on him. And so he thought, okay, we'll wait for Bakhmut to end. We bring Wagner back to the rear. We chop up Wagner, send some guys to Africa, send some guys to Belarus, some guys back to the Russian regular army, and then quietly remove this clown Prigozhin and put him somewhere. And Prigozhin, I think, understood that this was happening, and he would not go quietly into that good night. He had a little temper tantrum and tried to, did what he did with this mutiny, this protest. However, he's characterizing it right now, and now he's sitting in Belarus sulking, and God knows what he's going to do next. Probably not a lot. I'm guessing he's on watch now. He knows any more this nonsense, he might be taking a plunge off a building. But what this whole thing reminds me of, it reminds me of the TV show The Sopranos, where you have Tony Soprano running the mafia family in North Jersey, the Soprano family. And one reoccurring theme that was in the show was Tony having to deal with these personalities within his crime family that were a pain. and he's trying to manage them. Some guys were always just irrational, doing stupid stuff that he would have to fix. But they were useful. Some of them, they were good as far as, killing people. Some of them made a lot of money. So he's like, all right, this guy's a jerk, and he's all sorts of problems, but he's putting money in my pocket. And there's guys that were angling for his job, looking to take him out so they could be the boss. So Tony is constantly dealing with these characters that are not fun to be around and not fun to deal with. But as the boss, he's got to do it. And I think that's what Putin was doing with Prigozhin. Prigozhin was a pain in the ass, but he was useful in recruiting people to Wagner. Wagner's prominence was rising. It was, people were really excited about Wagner in Russia and across even parts of Africa. It was helping the war effort. So despite the fact that Prigozhin did his stupid stuff like film himself in front of bodies in the field, screaming at Russian high command, he let some of this stuff go because he was serving a purpose. But the problem is, and every leader has to take this into account, is that there's a danger to leaving around somebody, a subordinate, a lieutenant, who's impulsive, doesn't listen, and is unpredictable. And that was a gamble that Putin was making with Prigozhin that I think turned out to be snake eyes for him. He rolled snake eyes on Prigozhin. He would have been better off, in hindsight, had he taken or removed Prigozhin back when he was in Bakhmut and not let him pull this mutiny in Russia. So Putin is not perfect. He's been in power for over 20 years. He usually does a good job in making decisions. You can't get everyone right, and I think this was a situation where he got one wrong. And now he's going to have to spend the next several months doing damage control and make sure that this doesn't hurt the war effort or his position as the leader of Russia. And on that issue, externally, there's a lot going on. We in the West, we're salivating. Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, came out and said this is showing cracks. There are members of the Atlantic Council, a neocon organization. All these think tank people, they're salivating. They're so excited. They're like, oh my God, Putin he's shaky. He might fall. So they're losing their minds. And the reason that's a big deal is because we have this NATO meeting coming up in July. And before this happened, all the attention would have been on the offensive and the fact that it's not going very well. Now, instead of focusing on that, which is not good for NATO because there are some NATO members who are getting a little wary, this war's been dragging on. They've been giving up a lot of their equipment, money, and they kind of want to move on from this conflict. And with the offensive not going well, this would be a time for them to start, voice their opinion and say, hey, okay, we got to change up here. But because of this, mutiny thing, the attention's on that. That's what the NATO members will rally around as far as saying, hey, we got this far. All right, this sucks. This war's been going on for a while, but we're finally seeing some cracks in the Russian leadership. Their position is precarious. Now more than ever, we need to double down and give more weapons, more equipment, more support. So Putin, why would Putin want this to happen now before this NATO meeting when people are already getting a little shaky? Again, the idea that Putin wanted this is just preposterous to me. It makes no sense. And again, this NATO meeting has now changed. Another thing too, your allies, when Russia first invaded, all these sanctions were tossed onto Russia, and they were predicting a collapse of the Russian economy. And even Putin himself admitted that he was not sure what would happen. And he was surprised when the collapse or the loss in GDP or growth wasn't as drastic as predicted. But the success of Russia, their economy, has a lot to do with the support from their allies like China, Iran. I wouldn't say allies, people that still do business with Russia despite of the war. So like, India, South Africa. You get my point here. And since this event, it has been reported he's on the phone 24/7 talking to leaders saying, hey, everything's okay. It's going to work out. And the concern here is that if these people think that Russia is unstable, they will think twice about economically investing in Russia and putting money inside the country. If they get scared, they pull that money out. That's when Russia has a big problem, and that could be very destabilizing. And one other thing, the Russian ruling class, I always point out that no leader, even a dictator, can survive without support. And there was an article in the New York Times saying that the Russian ruling class, for the first time, is a little nervous and not completely assured that Putin is the person to provide that long-term stability. And there is an election coming up in 2024 in the spring. I don't think that Putin is in danger of not getting elected, but the article suggests, and of course, remember, New York Times, so, they're biased, suggesting that his position is not as assured now as it once was. And I think there's a tiny bit of truth to that. So, in balance, this is not a good thing for Russia. Putin did make a miscalculation in letting Prigozhin persist as long as he did, and he will be spending the next several months trying to work this out. Oh, and the very last thing, the battlefield. So the conventional wisdom was that the longer this went on, the worse for Ukraine, because Ukraine is running out of manpower and weapons, and Russia has tons of manpower. Their munitions, the production is just churning 24/7. And the longer this conflict went on, the worse it was for Ukraine. But I'm looking at this thinking to myself, well, if the neocons, if NATO, the West, think that Russia is a little rocky right now, and I guess with this Prigozhin thing, there is a little truth to that. If they keep prodding, keep poking, keep escalating, maybe they think now that they can cause a collapse of Russia and bring down Putin. And Putin has to think about that now. Does he want this war to persist for another 6 months to a year? Will that hurt him? Will that give the West an opportunity to pick at the scab now? That has to be a concern. So I think there might be a change in the way Russia moves forward with this war. Maybe they do something more drastic offensively to make a splash, to get territory back, and to end this conflict sooner than later. That's not 100%, but I do wonder if this war dragging out might actually not favor Russia now. Just a thought, but we'll see. Well, that's it for now. If you are new to my channel, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.